Good morning. This is December's Nonprofit Success Lab, and we welcome you all to it. This morning is a little unusual. Normally, we consider ourselves the sage on the stage, kind of as the experts in a particular topic. But this one, we did go and call on the experts. And so you'll get to hear from them today. So recently, Idaho Partners for Good was asked to step into a leadership position, a much broader leadership position. And as part of that, we are hosting things like this. And we want you to know that we're learning right alongside of you today because we want to know how to effectively step in on behalf of Idahoans. And that we want to encourage all of you to unite and engage to keep families in Idaho from falling off the cliff. We will be launching what's called our Idaho Neighbor to Neighbor in 2026. And we welcome you all to lean in. But this is one of the first pillars that we want to be addressing. So without further ado, I would like to, first of all, you're seeing something that we don't see very often anymore in Idaho. All four of our panelists were born and raised in Idaho. That is like, you don't ever hear about that anymore for panels. So, Brian, it looks like we've got a bunch of people in the waiting room. Would you mind?
Those are AI, the note takers.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah,
Thanks for
I've been
calling
watching
that
that.
out. All right. So, I would like to introduce you to our august panelists, alphabetical order, because they're all so tremendously awesome human beings. I'll start with Todd Cranney. Todd is a fifth generation Idahoan, grew up on a family farm in South Idaho. He always expected to be a farmer, but 9/11 happened and it changed his trajectory. Um, he was working in Washington, D.C. when 9/11 happened. So he has a very unique side of the story there. He co-founded Riverwood Strategies, but he has also served as the National Deputy Political Director of Romney for President in 2012. He was political director for Meg Whitman, governor in Idaho. He was the Western Regional Political Director for Romney for President in 2008. Did I already say that? Nope. He worked on Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger's reelection campaign and also field representative for Nevada and California for Bush Cheney in '04. Was political appointee under President George W. Bush at the Department of Ag and legislative aide on Capitol Hill for Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah. So thank you, Todd. Next is Megan. Megan Egbert is she practices employment law. She was for 15 years was one of our much beloved public librarians. She was born and raised here. She grew up enjoying the outdoors and recreating in North Idaho. She moved to Boise in 2004. She earned a bachelor's degree in multi-ethnic studies from Boise State, master's degree in library science from the University of North Texas, became involved in Idaho politics in 2006 through her work on Idaho Votes No. In the years that followed, she volunteered for several campaigns, including the successful 2016 Yes for Boise Schools Bond campaign. She's been recognized as Idaho Woman of the Year and Accomplished Under 40 by the Idaho Business Review. She received the Women Making History Award for Boise State University. She's volunteered as a guardian ad litem, served as a founding board member of Treasure Valley Children's Theater. During the 2024 legislative session, she substituted on both the Senate and House sides of the legislature. In June of 2024, she was appointed District 17 state representative to fill Representative Sue Chu's position. Of all the roles Megan's had, her most important has been being mom to her three children, ranging in age from 6 to 18. She is wife to her husband, Mike, who is one of our crew members. And next up is Chuck Winder, who grew up in Boise Valley, attended the College of Idaho, owned his own business for 30 years. After college, was a flight instructor in the Navy, entered public service, having served on the Boise City Planning and Zoning Commission, 13 years on ACHD Commission, 11 years as the chairman of the Idaho Transportation Board, 13 years in Idaho Senate, was elected President pro tempore of the Senate and served on the Education, Agricultural, State Affairs, and Transportation committees. He's been married to Diane for 53 years, has 2 children, 4 grandchildren, 3 step-grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. And I told him about 20 years ago, if he ever ran for governor, I'd help with his campaign. And last but not least, Julie Yamamoto. Julie is retired from the public schools after a 32-year career as a teacher and administrator. She served 2 terms in the House of Representatives, the last 2 years as chair of House Education. She currently serves on 14 nonprofit boards, including 2 charter schools and several service clubs and citizens committees. Whew! All right. So you got the experts in the house. So we're gonna dive right in. All right. So we prepared last week, and we're gonna just start by grounding in the current reality. So I'd like to let's go alpha order again for this question. But from your perspective, what misconceptions do nonprofits most often have about engaging in the legislative process? And then what's actually true?
Is Alpha Order, am I first? Is that
You're
what you said?
first.
Okay.
You're
Okay,
you're number
sorry.
one dog.
I don't know about that, but I just wanted to make sure I was thinking through everyone's name really quickly in alphabetical order. Um, yeah, well, great to be with you guys, and thanks Blossom for organizing this, and it's great to be on this great panel of just amazing, legislators, and they know more than I do. They've actually served and do serve in the legislature, so they'll have really great insights for you all. I guess to the question that Blossom answered, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is I think twofold. One, I think it's lack of engagement. I think some nonprofits probably think that they can't engage at all. And so I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, like the rules of the road there. But I do think that there's a lack of kind of engagement and kind of we can't engage or we don't want to engage because it's political. And I think that that is a big misconception and a big mistake. And then I also think it's well, we don't really understand the process or we don't know all the details. Perhaps we don't understand what's going on. And I can say that's also another misconception because just because you may not know all the details or understand all of that doesn't mean you can't figure it out very quickly, quite frankly. And also doesn't mean that you don't want to engage and learn more about the process, which again, I think that's part of what you're doing here and part of what Blossom and her team are hoping to accomplish. And so I would just say that I think again, the biggest misconception is the lack of engaging in the process. And then obviously I think figuring out how to do that. And so hopefully today we can give you guys some ideas about how to do that appropriately and effectively. And so with that, I'll kind of kick it over to the next in line because I think the legislators particularly have great insights into how to do this.
Okay, as a former librarian, I think alphabetical order puts me next. But thank you.
I'm glad you weren't the only one thinking through this for a second.
Yeah. I think Todd really nailed it and has said a lot of what I was thinking as well about, nonprofits not being clear on where the line is. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I am very new to the legislature, but I'm not new to nonprofits. And I had the tremendous opportunity of when I was in law school for 2 legislative sessions. I actually did a legislative internship with the Idaho Nonprofit Center, specifically looking at how bills would impact nonprofits in Idaho. So I think the only thing I would add to kind of the misconceptions that nonprofits have is I think there's a lot of nonprofits who also don't think that they're necessarily impacted by what happens in the Capitol and the legislation that we pass. And, after those 2 years of really just looking at everything through a nonprofit lens, that's not true. There's so much legislation that comes through that building that could have drastic impacts on nonprofits throughout Idaho. So I think that's the only thing I would add.
Yeah, and this is Chuck. I think the main thing I would say is, just kind of ditto, but I think the misconception that I see is that nonprofits think the legislature doesn't care about them, that they don't care about the people they serve. And I think that's not true. I think there's a lot of concern. I think there is compassion. And I think that a lot of the legislatures believe that the nonprofits are where a lot of these services need to be. And so I think, take your ideas, develop your ideas, develop those personal relationships, which you'll hear more about as we talk this morning. But don't be afraid to go to the legislature, because they do care about the people in their districts. They care about the services that are being provided or not being provided.
And this is Julie, and I'll just tie into what Senator Winder just said. And that is, I think the misconception is that your personal story doesn't matter. And the one thing, you can disagree on all kinds of policy issues, but nobody can disagree with you about your story. It's your story to tell. And so there's a reason why you are representing your nonprofit. Know that story and speak to it from personal experience, because that's going to make the direct connection that Senator Winder was talking about. And it also helps lay out the case without specifically asking for money or a vote one way or another. It just reminds people that we're all in this together. We need to be. And your personal story is what lays the groundwork for the good work that follows.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it to you, Chuck, because I want you to just give us a 30,000-foot view of how our decisions made at the Capitol.
And that's not easy to do. But I think, everybody comes there with good intentions. And one of the things that people don't realize is that each person that's there is elected by a different constituency. So give you an example. I couldn't get elected in the north end of Boise if it's, if I was the only person running. And that's probably true of the Democratic candidates coming out into the suburban areas. It'd be very difficult for them to get elected. So each person that's there represents a specific constituency that has elected them, and they're there to represent that group of constituents. So I think it starts there. It starts with ideas. Usually somebody, most of the people that run for the legislature are really passionate about some idea. They want to bring it, see it come into legislative action and become law or a rule or regulation to change something. And so to me, it's very personal. It starts in your neighborhood. It starts in your church. It starts in your grocery store, at your school. Those relationships and talking ideas, that's why you have the representation in our form of government, a Republican form of government, is you can approach them in your neighborhoods and tell them what your concerns are and ask them to look into those concerns and try and address them in rules or regulations or even change in the Idaho code. But it's all about personal relationships, just like anything else in your life is, whether it's in your professional life or in your personal life. It's about knowing the people, having access to them, and being willing to share your ideas with them.
Okay, I'm going to try something really quick here. I'm going off script, but to Chuck's point, if you personally know a legislator down at the State House, I want you to put that in the chat. I want you to put their name in the chat, because it just occurred to me that after this, we could actually send them this link. So, all right. So then I'm going to open this question up to the rest of the panelists. What do you wish legislators, or what do legislators wish nonprofits understood about how decisions are made?
I'll just jump in on how important the committee level is. And I know that some people get really aggravated that legislation doesn't make it out of committee, but it really is the vetting process. It's supposed to be the vetting process where it might have good intentions, but there could be issues with it. And one of the things that you could do that would be really helpful is, instead of just saying, I want you to vote yes or no, is if you give rationale for why something is positive or negative, what the actual effect will be of that legislation, so that it does two things. It gives those if they haven't given it thought, gives them reason to think about it. And it also allows them to have talking points, potential talking points, why they are going to say something for or against it, both in committee and if it makes it to the floor. So your verbiage that is grounded in reality of where the rubber meets the road, that's going to be really helpful.
Julie, where do they get the information about the committees and who heads them?
And this is tough because most of you, your nonprofit, you might be the person who runs point on everything, and that makes it particularly challenging. But if you have someone, even a volunteer, who would be willing to watch the legislative site, that they can do bill tracker, and it actually tells them what's coming up in the committees, where it's at in the process. And sometimes you only have 24 hours in which to respond and have somebody. And a lot of the committees now allow for, like this, Zoom virtual testimony. Not all of them. Juden rules, I think, and it depends on the chairman. But you'll need somebody who's paying attention and looking for the things that specifically will affect your nonprofit and that you want to be able to speak to. And maybe you all, whoever's on this call, form a coalition, and you have somebody who takes on this week, and then somebody else takes on another week, so that because I realize most of you are the person, but somebody has to be paying attention to where those things are and being able to send either written testimony or verbal testimony.
Awesome. So that's a great segue to Megan. Megan does have a legal background. And so I'm going to throw this question to you, Megan. What forms of advocacy are explicitly allowed for 501c3s and which cross the legal lines?
Sure. So, the first thing I will say is that it's probably way too much to go into, in this session right now. But some quick and easy rules, I would say, and then I'll point you to some more in-depth resources. First of all, anything nonpartisan is going to be much easier than anything partisan, which means that, we're not really usually going to see nonprofits who are like endorsing candidates who are, an R or a D, that type of stuff. However, there's a lot of leeway for stuff that is okay in terms of voter engagement, right? Or even candidate questionnaires or candidate forums, those type of things. Lobbying is another thing that I think a lot of nonprofits feel like they can't touch, which just also isn't true. What I would say is, if you are interested in doing more than a little bit of lobbying, there is a very quick and easy and free form that you can fill out for tax purposes called the 501h election, which just makes it so that you can do more lobbying than you could otherwise. But I want to direct you, and I promise I'm not an employee of them anymore, but when Julie was talking about the bill tracking, the Idaho Nonprofit Center does track. They have a legislative intern who during the session tracks all the bills on their advocacy page that could impact nonprofits. And they also have a guide for nonprofits when it comes to political action, and they go into more detail of what you can do and what you can't.
Awesome. Would anyone else want to add some color to that?
Yeah, I would just say that I don't think you need to be afraid to build relationships with legislators. I think, to Megan's point, you do have to understand kind of what you can and can't do in the session and what you can talk about. And I think it's a lot simpler, I think, for nonprofits, because largely speaking, you guys are not into, partisan issues. But I think one of the mistakes that's made is that because it's political, there's a step back and like, oh, we can't do this. And I would say to the earlier question, what do legislators want people to know, in addition to what Julie said, and I think Chuck should weigh in here, is the session's going on for 3 months, give or take. But once you get to the session, I mean, a lot of things, the cake is baked in a lot of ways. Like there's so much incoming things happening to the legislators. that if you're trying to have a conversation with them or build a relationship with them, then it's too late. And so it's a year-round process it's just like anything. I mean, politics is very relationship driven, as is really, in my view, anything, particularly in the nonprofit world and the nonprofit boards that I sit on as well. So relationships are important and they have to be built on authenticity and they have to be genuine and they're much harder to build when when you're in a fire drill, which is basically what the legislative session is for legislators. It's a fire drill like every day for 3 months. And so my thinking for you guys to think about is building relationship with these legislators early throughout the year when perhaps there's no need for you for anything that you need. Perhaps there's nothing on the radar. First of all, going back to what Chuck said, these are good people. They all want to serve their districts. They would love to know what's going on. Perhaps they're not aware of the nonprofit. They don't know the good work it does. So having legislators come out and see the nonprofit when it's not in the middle of the session, when it's, calmer times, those relationship building exercises, I think, are crucial. And by that, you can also learn a lot more about the process and about maybe opportunities that are available that they could be helpful with that could help the nonprofit world, or if nothing else, be there for you if something happens and there's a crisis and you guys need to engage. And so I think it's just like anything else is building relationships, building them naturally, building them with multiple legislators, not just maybe just not the ones in your district, learning some of the players, getting to know them, getting on their radar. I think it doesn't just help for a legislative fight. I think it also helps your nonprofit overall. It could help from a fundraising standpoint. It could help from an awareness standpoint. All the things you're trying to do to highlight your great work and then fund your great work. I think it's the natural process of what you already do. It's just engaging with legislators early and building those relationships, I think is something that's really, really important.
So I'm going to follow up with that because I want to ask all four of you. There are 105 House representatives and 34 senators.
No, it's 70 and 35.
Okay.
Total
Okay.
five.
Total
Okay.
105. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's
Okay.
enough. Don't add.
Well, so there is no possible way for me to know who I should really target based on my issue, based on what they care about. How do we know who to go and create these relationships with? Because, it may or may not be relevant.
Well, I think it starts with your own senator and two House members from your district. Get to know those three people. Then you're going to have specific issues that relate to your nonprofit, whether it's in health and welfare. It could be in a business or a judiciary committee. Uh, find out where your subject matter is going to be covered by what committee, and then get to know the chairman, get to know perhaps your one of your elected delegates will be on one of those committees. Use that as your entry point to get to know the rest of the committee and what they're doing. Um, that's my best suggestion, is just start at home with your own people and expand from there and identify the issues that you're concerned about. Find out the committees that handle those and get familiar with those committee members.
So just to add to that, if you don't have, because in the House, in the Senate, it's pretty likely that there's fewer of them, so they are on more committees. But in the House, it's more widespread. But your three can tell you who might have similar compassion and heart for whatever it is you're doing. And I would make sure I was inviting them to something that you're doing. And it sounds manipulative, but especially in election years, a lot of times they're looking for those opportunities to have photo opportunities or show that they're engaged in the community. And so, that isn't saying they don't have a good heart. I'm just saying the reality is every 2 years they're running for election. So if you can get them engaged and they're seeing what you're doing, that I think would be helpful.
And I would just say one thing there is keep it simple. If you know one or two of the legislators, then get their advice and ask them like who do I need to know? Who should I know that would be helpful for the issues that I'm working on, and have them help you. You just need one or two really good advocates that are your friends that can then help you understand the process and the players and who to help with, and a sitting legislator that's your friend will know that.
Okay, so here's the flip side of that question. Many of us worry that what if we accidentally do something wrong? What are the actual risks? And what are some practices to keep us safe?
Well, I think Megan can probably deal with the legal side of that question, if she'd like to do that.
Yeah, and sorry, Blossom, when you say that, do you mean like that they'll do something wrong, like cross that political divide or, lobby when they're not supposed to be lobbying
Right.
or yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I will tell you, and like I said, I'm new to the legislature. I maybe have a little bit more knowledge about this than some of the other legislators, but I've never been in a room with a nonprofit even knowing the law where I've been like, oh my God, they just crossed the line. Like it's never even occurred to me. And so maybe I could just give you like a quick example of like what this usually looks like to kind of ease people's minds that, if you're going and you're scheduling a meeting with a legislator, usually it's very short and you're just talking about whatever it is you're passionate about, what your nonprofit does. You're talking about your mission. You're just providing a little bit of education. And if that's what you're doing, you really have very little to, worry about. And so I wouldn't so much frame it as that like there is this very clear line, because there's not, and that people would even know if you cross it, right? I would stick to the mission of your nonprofit, why you care about a specific bill, how it could impact the people that you serve, and I don't think you have much to worry about.
Okay.
The one
So
thing that
go ahead.
I just would add this, and that is that if you're asking those that are supportive of you to send information to legislators, you want to help them help you by not saying things like, and I vote, and you need to do this or that, and that they're trying to be supportive of you, but it comes across really negative and like in an attack. And it's happened more than once that I've called somebody to say, hey, do you know that because of what you put out, people are sending emails to somebody who's really supportive saying something quite snippy? And so help your people help you by giving them, like they'll just do a diatribe and end it with God bless you or something, say, gee whiz, you're kind of at cross purposes. So help your people help you.
So keep it respectful.
That'd be always good.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just say Medicaid is up on the chopping block is what they're looking at this year. And I've got a lot of clients that are recipients. What would be a good tactic to go and advocate and educate the legislators that are on the Health and Welfare Committee?
Yeah, I could start on that one. I am on health and welfare. This is obviously one of, the issues that I have had to, do the deepest dive into because it's super complex. I would say one of the things is that it's really important for nonprofits on this specific topic is find out, you already know, but who else works in this realm, right? Who are other nonprofits? I think it's a lot more impactful if you can team up with people to share stories and some of the same messages than it is necessarily for a small nonprofit to just go and say we have 15 clients or whatever it is. I think that kind of shared purpose is really important to understand that there's others working in this realm, so find them. I think that you always want to do some sort of training beforehand if you are advocating for like any of your clients or customers to share their story, you want to make sure that it's all those things that we just talked about, that it's positive, that it's not blaming people, that it's, truly just sharing your story. So I would do a small amount of training beforehand. And I think those would be my tips.
Yeah, I'd say I think, you can talk all the legal code you want to talk and, bill drafting and all that, but it comes down a lot of times to just what is that personal story of what your nonprofit is passionate about. But I think one of the things that so many groups forget is sharing your successes. What are your outcomes? Why do you have your organization? You want to use not only maybe a tearjerker story, but here's something that really we were able to succeed and we helped this family stay together. We helped them, in lots of different ways. And I think those to me are, the way you build your relationships and educate. You're not lobbying at this point. You're educating people on what your nonprofit does and what your outcomes are.
Yeah, and I'd add one quick thing to that, to Chuck's point there too, is I think showing legislators the value of the value you guys bring. I mean, you cover a whole section, and I think it was Julie that mentioned it earlier, or Chuck perhaps both, that a lot of these legislators philosophically believe in what nonprofits do and believe that's the role of a nonprofit. And so helping them understand the value you provide, helping them understand how government potentially could help supercharge that value, perhaps. I mean, it just depends on what it is, right? I mean, those are things I think that are music to legislators' ears. If they see value, they see how they, better use of tax dollars, thinking about it in those terms, those are all things. And just think about what a legislator cares about, like Julie mentioned, or I mean, what do they care about getting? That's why you got to get to know them. What's the most important thing to them? Sometimes it's the value of it. It's the emotional piece of it. Sometimes it's the fiscal piece of it. It just depends. And so I think nonprofits can have lots of different ways to build relationships and tell their story and tell it to a legislator and something that relates to them. You got to get to know them first, and then I think you got to think through like what's the best way to approach this conversation, and be based on what is most important to a legislator. And so again, you got to know them to know that.
Awesome. I will forecast to you all that we have a data website that we're putting together based on the input of the nonprofit sector to do just exactly what Megan was saying, was to identify who's there in the trenches with you if you don't already know them, and then being able to tell your story. So I'll just let you know that that's coming. Okay,
Blossom.
next question. When?
Blossom.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to add one little thing to what was said, and that is that even as a legislator, there were certain legislators that I kind of did not want to go and even talk to, because they have written things or put things out or said things that I thought were just so actually hateful, or that just didn't align with where I feel like I am. And I would encourage you to try to look at them, that they have a mom and dad who probably love them, that they probably are a dad or a mom that have kids who love them. And it really changed my mind about going to those folks too, and trying to make that connection and say, I'm going to believe the best in you. And that if I share my story with you, that is a truth that you can't take away from me. So they're not going to take away from you, anything away from you, that you might at least soften their response to whatever message that comes when it does come to committee or floor.
Julie, I cannot tell you how that fills my heart, because we are going into a session where everybody feels like they're putting their battle gear on, and being able to actually see beyond anything that person writes or says into their motives, and that they've got people they love. So please, please always go in with best intentions, even if it's looks completely otherwise. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Julie. Okay, here's the next question. When during the legislative cycle is it most effective for nonprofits to engage on a specific bill? And when is it too late?
Well, I think, part of the problem is knowing when a bill is even out there for consideration. And the way the system works is uh, when you have an RS, which is the original draft of a bill, uh, it is not open to the public. So how do you find out about that? And again, that comes back to, your personal relationships, your representatives or senator from your district, or you may know someone from some other part of the state that went to school with, or through church or whatever, or business, whatever. Uh, Use them and ask them if they're aware of anything. And it needs to start back in the summer and early fall, because once the session starts, things are basically helter skelter, and bills are coming, on a regular basis, and they'll have almost 800 bill drafts in the first month or two, and it's very difficult to know what's going on or really have much impact on those, other than, as Julie mentioned, through the committee vetting process, and if they actually gets to a public hearing. But it's not too late, obviously, when it's in the session, but it's almost too late. You're in the 11:30 time frame when it's actually in the legislative session, so you need to know as much as possible sooner, so you can have some impact on it and organize your support base to either support or oppose something.
And if you know somebody well enough, it's not even too late if it's being debated on the House floor. It might be, I don't know, I'm not going to speak for the Senate, but I can't tell you how many text messages that I got that said, where are you at now? Because I've been listening to the debate, and they were worried that maybe I was going to switch because I always tried to, and that you're going to hear from a lot of legislature that they try to keep their powder dry. That's a common phrase that is used, where they're not going to tell you one way or another. You probably have a pretty good idea, but even then, if you have developed that relationship ahead of time, you can text somebody and say, is there anybody I need to shore up? Is there, who can I, it's all about relationships. Back to what Todd says, it's all about that.
Yeah, I would just echo it's never too late, but it's also never too early, right? Yeah. So just to give a little bit of perspective, and I spoke on a panel at the Idaho Nonprofit Conference, so some of you might have heard that, but to give a little bit of perspective, we had a period of time last session where the governor had vetoed a bill, the Medical Freedom Act, and then people knew that it was going to be coming back. And so I actually did a little search to find out in less than 24 hours, we got over 1,000 emails, or I did. And I'm assuming everybody did. Right. But that means we don't have staff to go through that. I mean, that means anybody who emailed me during that time period, it was lost. I saw none of it, because you can't keep up with 1,000, emails in less than 24 hours. So just to give a little bit of perspective of stuff can get very, very buried when we get to that point in the session. But that doesn't mean don't do it, right? If it was a bill that you did not know about before, let your voice be heard, but just know that we are inundated with information at that point.
Add chocolate.
Yeah.
I see a raised hand from Jamie Whitmer.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for holding this session. Speaking of receiving 1,000 emails in 24 hours, I know all of our legislators receive dozens, hundreds of emails, right, every day, every week. So I'm curious, do you still recommend that as the best way to initiate communication with legislators? Or certainly a warm connection is always best, but if you don't have one, how do you recommend that we go about trying to create relationships with legislators?
Yeah, I found it's really personalized. Every legislator this is always asked on panels, and everybody has a different preference. I will tell you, and I think it's changed since Chuck and Julie were there. We have a new email system that filters out emails in a new way. And so any emails where the heading is the same, so think any of those form emails that you're circulating, it sends those to something called gray mail. And a lot of people are not even seeing them, to be honest. So I am not a big proponent of email right now for those two reasons. One, we get so many sometimes. And then also we have this new filtering system. We don't even see a lot of them. I think phone calls for me, like phone calls and leaving a voicemail. But the other thing I would say that I think people are trying to hit on too is like, obviously the more proactive you can be, even better. So if your representatives, senators are doing town halls during session, I would go to those. I would meet them in person whenever you can. I would go to where they are. If they're speaking on a panel, I would try and go and introduce myself, always in person if possible. But for me, at least, I always listen to my voicemails. I can't always get to my emails.
Yeah, I
Part of
would
the,
just say, oh, go ahead, Chuck. Go
I
ahead.
just say as part of, building those relationships, if you get to know somebody, a lot of times you'll have their personal cell number. So you can call them, directly. Uh, you may have a private email that goes to them. So again, that's the importance of relationships, getting them to know you, getting them to trust you, and to have that open access of communication. But there's a system you can use. You can call and leave messages. You can, you know, some people write handwritten notes on issues. Those are, I think, well received in most cases. But if you've got somebody's cell phone number and you can text them a message or phone call to them, that's really helpful. And that's part of building those personal relationships back in your community.
I would just add, I think quality over quantity is always better. I do think quantity sometimes is helpful. I think it depends. But what I would say, Jamie, to kind of your question, what I would suggest to all the nonprofits is that you should have legislators out to your nonprofit and have them come visit it, tour it, so that you can tell them about what you're doing, and you can do it when you're not in the middle of a firestorm of the session. And so then you have kind of the warm relationships there available. And I think that's an easy thing for all of you to do, honestly, and to do it over the course of the year. And I would do it regardless of whether you have anything you think is coming up in the session or and then it's just it's available to you as an option, because then you can organize quality contacts into the legislators, just as Chuck was saying, and Julie, I mean, and Megan, I mean, if it's somebody that they know and trust, they're going to be paying attention to that. They're going to see that. Because in fairness to all the legislators, I mean, as Megan had alluded to, I can only imagine. I mean, it's chaos when you're in there and you're getting so much information at one time. And so you got to be able to cut through there. And if you don't have the relationship, it's not that they don't care. It's just, who can process all that information? Nobody really can. They don't have any staff. And so they're operating on their own with very little help. And, they're part-time legislators who also have jobs and other things going on. So you got to be understanding of what you're dealing with. And then the other thing I'd say, I think Julie mentioned this, I would add this just overall to everyone, is that you have to kind of put aside your personal politics. And I really think it's a huge mistake that many people make, is that they don't want to build a relationship with somebody because they don't agree with them on everything or most things. You're going to agree with them on something. And so all you need them to do is agree with you on your issue. Who cares about the other nine things that you disagree with them on? But you need to be able to put aside your personal politics and build relationships for what matters most. And you're going to find that there's a lot of good people that maybe you don't agree with them 80% of the time. But that 20% of the time you do agree with them, that's going to overlap with something that's very important for the work you're doing and the things you're trying to accomplish for other people. That's a good thing. And we got to get away from, like, we got to agree with somebody 100% of the time for us to work with them. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make. I think nonprofits are probably better at this because you're better human beings doing good things, but other people maybe not as much. That's my personal observation. I'm not attributing that to anybody on this call. But I just think it's an important concept that has to be done. And Julie alluded to it earlier. And it's easy to say this, I know, for me, but it's just really important for that to happen, in my view, to be successful.
And I'll just just tie into what Todd said to Jamie, and that is, or to all, is that you're already sending things out about good work you're doing. But if you do have an event, just make sure you add your 3 people, and then maybe ask. To me, emails always got a response if you ask me a direct question. Can you think of anyone else in the area that I could invite to spread the good news? Because now you're asking them to enter into your space and to be a part of what you're doing. You're not telling them, I know you have a million things that you could go to and you might not be able to come, but is there somebody else who you would suggest that I would reach out to? Now you've acknowledged their ability to help you in whatever little way they can. And once they respond, you've got a little more traction and then a little more traction. And I know I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to say be manipulative. I'm just trying to say, how do you help somebody see you and see the good work that you do and give them a reason to come alongside and help you on your journey?
So I know this question that I'm going to ask is a little bit on the fiery side, but I think everybody's needing to know the role of lobbyists, both in state and out of state, has grown tremendously. So what would you recommend the nonprofit sector does to uh, to work with the lobbyists that are down in the state house?
Well, one thing is, if your associations have political consultants that you use during the session or during the year, get to know them, find out, what their connections are so that you can use them to be advocates for your group. If not, there's a book that's published. It's just the Green Book, or you can find it also on the Secretary of State's site. Find out the lobbyists, go and look and see who they represent, see who may be, a pharmaceutical representative or something. If you've got some issue with that, find the lobbyists that are involved in those issues that impact your organization, get to know them, let them know what you do. And I think most of them are receptive to that. And most of them are really good people again. And it's a relationship of trust between, good lobbyists and legislators, and they can be helpful to you.
There are a few who have a reputation with some folks, and so use your 3 people again to vet out which lobbyists that they might suggest would help you further your cause, because there are some kryptonite people. There are.
True.
I would just add that, I haven't talked to them yet about their plans this year, but for the last 2 sessions, the Idaho Nonprofit Center did have a lobbyist at the State House. She's super respected, very good. And so if that continues, don't be afraid to utilize those people as well.
Okay, we're at a place where we're going to open it up. But before I do that, let me ask about this idea. Is it a good idea to, if you don't know anybody right now down at the State House, that maybe this group of people, attendees, send them a Christmas card or something like that, just to put their card in and just tell them what they're concerned about or what they love?
Everybody likes to get mail.
Okay. All right. With that, we're going to open it up. And I believe, Foster, you had one of the first questions.
Well, I think Chuck talked about it a little bit, but when we were talking earlier about doing lobbyist work yourselves, if you're not, what makes an official lobbyist? In other words, do you have to register with the secretary's office to do that, or are you free to do it up to a certain point or a certain level? That was my question.
Well, I'm going to jump in here and Megan should jump in too, but I would simplify this just a little bit for you guys. Like, relationship building and talking to legislators and all that stuff, you don't have to do anything. I mean, that's very straightforward. If you ever have a question, you can always contact the Secretary of State's office. Phil is amazing and his team, and they can clarify, and you can ask them specifically, okay, here's what I want to do. Do I need to register as a lobbyist? I think the way to think about this in my mind, and others should jump in here, is if you're going to go for specific funding from legislators or run a specific bill, then yes, and you're going to go engage directly in the process, then you may either need to engage a lobbyist or you may have to register a lobbyist. So you have to think about it that if you're going to take that very direct step, and if you are simply wanting to weigh in on a piece of legislation and how you can do that without registering a lobbyist, again, you can always ask the Secretary of State's office. But I think you have to think through if you're just relationship building and paying attention to the legislature and what they're doing, and you're just telling them about the good work that you guys do and the things that would be helpful to you, broadly speaking on policy, the policies that it would be helpful that are broad, then to me that's not lobbying. That's you and educating legislators, and you can do that. But if you start getting into a specific bill or running a specific bill or making a specific ask, then I think you have to double check with the Secretary of State's office how much you can do without being a registered lobbyist and when you have to cross that threshold where you actually would have to register. But there's many ways to avoid doing that and without you guys having to do that because many people don't want to do that. They don't, it's not, no offense. The lobbying is a very important part of the process that we have here to help legislators be educated. But, a lot of people don't want to do that. And you guys are a nonprofit. You want to run your nonprofit. You don't want to be lobbyists. And so you want to avoid that if you can. And there's lots of ways to avoid it, but still be engaged in the process. Secretary of State is a good resource and there's a manual on everything. But if you're not sure, you can always call them and ask them and say, hey, here's what I want to do. And they can specifically tell you, yes, no, you can do this up to this point. And then after that, you would have to register.
And I think it's
Julie, Chuck, jump in here.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're actually going to work on something specific, funding, rules, that kind of thing for a entity, then you probably ought to really look at getting registered. Any citizen has the right to go and lobby on pretty much anything they want to, but when you start doing it for being paid for it or you're representing an entity, that's where you cross the line. But if you had something, Foster, that didn't have anything to do with your organization or that, you have the right to go and lobby on those other issues without being registered.
If it's a hot topic, a hot button issue, that's where I would probably be concerned because there's somebody who's always looking for a gotcha moment. And I would suspect that most nonprofits are not going to be in that crosshair, but you could easily get there if it were something that I'm thinking of women's health and those kinds of issues. It could land you there. So everything that's been said, yeah.
So by that, she means that it's better to be registered than not.
Yeah.
Julie, what are the other hot buttons?
Well, I think education in general, anything that happens within that space, anything that might get tied to that the diversity, equity, and inclusion might get tied to are going to be hot topic issues. Parental rights, which I think could fall into a lot of your nonprofit things, those could be, rights and responsibilities, those kind of that two thing, those could be hot topics as well. Can you think of other ones, Megan and Chuck, Todd?
Well,
Libraries.
Yeah. Oh no, not libraries, not books.
Well, if you think of social issues and cultural issues, you're probably going to have some hot button topics there. But, I do agree with what Chuck said earlier. It's better be safe than sorry. But I also think if you're informed and know what you are doing, there's a lot of things you can do that are not lobbying. That's not classified as lobbying you have to register for. And so just understanding that and asking questions is really important. But if there's any questions or any concerns, and that will be the advice Secretary of State would give you if it's on the line, you probably better be safe than sorry.
And if you do have questions that we can't answer today, we will be following up with the Secretary of State's office to get answers. So put them in the chat or in email. By the way, if you did not register, if you just came in through the LinkedIn or something like that, we won't be able to send you the recording. So you'll have to give us your email so we can follow up and send you the legislative activity guide and other resources that were referenced here today. So in closing, what I would really like to do is invite each one of you panelists to just your words of wisdom, kind of to synthesize what your hope is for the nonprofit sector. And I'm going to start backwards this time. Chuck?
Perfect.
Well, that's not backwards. You'd
No,
start forward.
Julie.
the
Oh,
end is
Julie.
usually
Thank
the
you.
Y, but I
Thank
did
you,
have
Julie.
a Z in my alphabet in school, so once in a while I was not last. But the last shall be first in this case. And I would just say to you, always speak from the heart. And I think that will cover a multitude of sins, right? Be brief, know exactly what it is that you want them to, your 30-second elevator speech, know exactly what it is that the message that you want to leave them with. Help it be memorable so that there's that balance of heartstring and mind connect. Why does it matter? Why does this matter? Why should this matter to you? Because it should matter to everyone who draws breath, that we are taking care of others in our community. So Godspeed to you, and thank you for being willing to do the hard stuff. Somebody has to do it. And so good to see so many faces and people who are taking up the bootstraps.
Yeah, and I would just follow up on that and say, again, what I tried to say earlier was people in the legislature do care about what you're doing. They do support the idea of nonprofits rather than government doing things. So don't be afraid to go talk to them. Develop those relationships, again, back at home, back at your schools, back at your churches, wherever you can have contact with these people, so that when you talk to them during the session or prior to the session, they know who you are, they know what your organizations are doing. And then I think Todd gave probably one of the best pieces of advice was, invite them to your group, bring them to show them what you do, tell them what your success stories are. I think that breaks down a lot of barriers. That'll open up doors in the future.
I would just add, don't let partisanship get in the way of politics, right? I am in the super minority party. There is nobody in that building that I would not go to lunch with and have an enjoyable time. So I promise that you can find common ground with anybody in that building, anybody who is your representative or senator. So I would just have an open mind when you're having these conversations, even if they don't agree with you about what you are coming to talk to them about. You're going to get more information from them about what their values are, about why they don't agree with it. And the more information that we can get, then it better helps us with our arguments. So don't be afraid to have the conversations. Don't assume that people won't agree with you. Go in with an open mind and just learn what you can.
Yeah, I think you've gotten some great advice from a lot of folks, the legislators, past and current legislators who know better than I do. I would just say thank you guys for all the work you do. You're a vital part of our community. We know that. I've served on some nonprofit boards. We know the hard work you do, the passion you bring. I think that that's what it comes down to also with legislators. You have a group of legislators who all are trying to do good things for their district, just like you're trying to do good things in the community for the cause that you believe in. And so understanding that when you're meeting with legislators, when you're building relationships with them, I think is really crucial. I think what Megan said is very important. I think what Chuck said is very important. What Julie said is very important. Um, Appreciate the hard work you guys do. I just would say what I said earlier. Everything in life, the currency of life, in my view, and one of the currencies of many currencies of life is relationships. And it's building relationships that are genuine, that are authentic. And I think the more you can do that in this process, the more it better serves our state, just like you're serving our state as is right now and the work you're doing to make a difference for others. And so we appreciate the work you're doing. We're grateful for you. We want you to be able to be more successful. And again, I just think the more you can expand your relationships with legislators and build genuine relationships with them, the more successful you can be and the more successful our state can be. So thanks for all you guys do. We appreciate you.
Merry Christmas.
And I will close it up with something that I think we all love, which is quaking aspen. And aspen trees do not stand alone. What appears to be a forest is often a single living organism, connected by one vast shared root system. Each trunk you see on the surface is simply an expression of the strength, resilience, and health of the community beneath it. The nonprofit sector is the aspen grove in Idaho. So if you would like to stay on and ask more questions, feel free. But at this point in time, we will formally say thank you to our panelists. A shout out to Jana Kemp, who's on here as well, who former legislator, but very closely aligned with the work we do here at Idaho Partners for Good. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas.
Merry
Enjoy your
Christmas.
families.